Welcome to Orchestrated, a Musio podcast where we discuss the past, present, and future of music creation to explore exactly what it means to be a musician in the modern era. I'm Chris Hayzel.
I'm Mike Patti.
And I'm Steve Goldshein.
And we're glad to have you all with us. So it's the first week of 2024, and we're kind of getting all of our ducks in a row to do some big things with Musio in the new year. And as we continue to explore the latest technology to add helpful tools for music creators, there's sort of one exploding area of tech that we don't really know what to do with, but it looms large enough that it's unavoidable, and that's artificial intelligence. AI is kind of a hot button topic, especially in the world of music and arts, and for good reason. There are a ton of questions about it, from how it'll impact the way that people learn music to how it affects music professionals, all the way down to things like copyright issues regarding the existing music that it's trained on. But despite all of that, it's coming. And in a lot of ways, it's already here. It's sort of like the further integration of AI into the world of music is inevitable. So as a music tech company, it's an especially pertinent and nuanced thing that we're kind of obligated in a way to consider. So today we wanted to have a hopefully equally nuanced conversation about it, and it's actually kind of becoming a bit of a theme for the content this month. So like Mike, you're going to do a vlog later on this month that sort of talks about our thought process around integrating AI into Musio, right? Mm-hmm. But like before anyone gets all up in arms about it, I'm just going to go ahead and reiterate, like, we're not sure if we're going to do it or even how we would do it. So it's definitely like not a foregone conclusion.
Yeah. So Chris, why don't I maybe give some context as to the reason why we're doing this podcast? So yeah, last year, November 28th, I posted a video on X, mostly just to see what people would say, because a buddy of mine just made a web app for Musio. Basically what it is it's a MIDI generator that takes a prompt and gives you MIDI data that you can then drag into your DAW and perform the instruments from Musio. So I was like, it already is possible with the newest tools that OpenAI made it accessible to non-technical people like myself. And I was able to build this using there's like an assistant API. And so my friend and I just made it really easy so that you could just have it as a web app. And I made a video just typing in a piece for flute and harp and like for a fantasy video game or something. And then it generated the MIDI. I showed the video of it playing the music back with the instruments in Musio. I was like, okay, I mean, it's kind of cool. I was like, I'm impressed that this was even possible so easily without having to hire some big team, right? So I put it up there to see like, what would people think? And I wrote, we whipped up an AI MIDI generator web app from Musio. So I posted and I got like a ridiculous amount of comments.
Yeah, there were a lot.
Shares and bookmarks and retweets and all this stuff. And I would say mostly people were cordial, I think, trying to have productive conversation. Some people said you're going to single-handedly destroy the music industry. Some people said, don't do this, Mike. This is horrible. Some people said, I think this is really exciting. I want this now. So it's like a real mixture, but it definitely was a heated, and I think I put it out there exactly at a very heated time where everyone was talking about music and AI. And, that's the best kind of feedback you can get as the owner of a company, because you don't know, you do stuff in a vacuum most of the time. So it was really good to put that out there because it allows us to be like, okay, what should we actually build? If we just put this out there, are we just going to piss everybody off? Or is it going to be something that's actually useful that people want? So that's where we are right now, is like, this technology is coming. For better or for worse. There's going to be pros, there's going to be cons, and I think that's what we're going to discuss today. Yeah. And how do we navigate that? And we're seeing, a lot of other companies navigating this as well. Some are doing it kind of right. Some are making big mistakes. So, this is this is why I wanted to have this conversation.
Yeah. I mean, it's such a new sort of like Wild West type of tech, just like a lot of tech has been really over the last maybe decade or two. But this one's so new and it's developing so fast that it's something that we kind of have to like talk about. We're a music tech company, right? And if we don't consider it, everybody else is. So it's something that's on our plate and in front of us.
Yeah, and it needs to be a transparent conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because there's a truth to this that's really uncomfortable, and I think we need to address that big change is coming. And look, I don't like change, and I'm the owner of a company, which is probably a bad combination. You need to change and you need to adapt in order to, because you can't just rest on your laurels, especially if you're creative, and can't just think that things that it worked for the last 5 years are going to continue into the future. So yeah, that's kind of part of the discussion. And AI is just one of those things. It's going to be a big change. I don't think it's going to ruin our lives, but we have to adapt. So
yeah, there are a lot of different ways that it could go. But like, so before we dive into the conversation here, just to kind of level set, why don't each of us go around and just give a brief overview of our own personal feelings about AI? Steve, why don't you start us off?
Sure. So my role with Musio is I'm dealing directly with the customers. I run the customer service department, and we are getting the feedback, the same kind of feedback that Mike is getting from his post on X, all types. You know, we're hearing the full spectrum of opinions and ideas and wants and hopes and dreams and wishes that things could happen or things that wouldn't happen. And we take it all in. And my perspective on this is heavily informed by that, you know, what we're hearing from other people. And as far as my own personal feelings, I agree with a lot of the hype. I think that AI technology is something that's incredibly cool, incredibly powerful, incredibly fun to play with and to explore, and can do all kinds of crazy things that we couldn't do with you know, the kind of language models that we had a few years ago. I think that there is a lot of fear around what it might do for creative industries like composing and all of that, which may or may not be warranted. My take on this is that for people who need music for media and want to work with a composer are going to work with a composer because they already have other options to get their music for free or for low cost or through some other way. They can work with a student who's going to do it for peanuts. They can license music from a music library. They can get music that's public domain. I mean, one of the best examples of this is Always Sunny in Philadelphia. One of the longest running series of all time now has very famously used public domain music in their early seasons because they didn't have a music budget, and so it was all for free. And now it's, you know, iconic that public domain music that has become their theme, and that those options have always existed for filmmakers and game developers and animation producers and people who need music for their projects. One thing that I think AI will never be able to replace is the type of relationship that you develop as a composer working with a client and working with a director and getting inside each other's minds and helping bring the creative vision to life. If you get a composing gig and you get hired again for the sequel and you get hired again for more projects by the same people, that has more to do with your relationship with those people than it does. I mean, obviously the quality of your work has to be up to snuff for the project too, but ultimately if you're getting hired and rehired by the same people, it's because they like you and they want to keep working with you.
Yeah, definitely. How about you, Mike? What are your baseline feelings about AI?
I think it's cool, but what we all thought was it was going to help us do our taxes, but the first thing that's come after is the artist, which is we thought that would be the last thing. It'll never replace the visual arts. I will say music. Maybe I'm biased. I don't know. This could be a biased opinion, being a musician myself. But music is kind of unique as far as the arts are concerned. When people listen to music, this is at least how I do. When I listen to music, I'm thinking about the creator of that music. I'm usually thinking, oh, this is this is inspired, or you're thinking about what that person was going through when they wrote it. There's a human component to it that I think is not really, you can't really achieve with AI. You can get close. I think there could be approximations that can simulate. That's what AI is. It's a what do you call it? An imitator. It imitates really well.
Yeah.
But we all know, like, as film composers, and Steve knows because he's done this too, you have to be an imitator. And I know that, like, a lot of the stuff that I've written for projects is kind of has been phoned in. Don't tell anybody that, but like sometimes you got to crank it out real fast, and it's not always inspired. You just gotta, okay, we want something to sound like this. That, it needs to sound like from this movie, or it's temped with some other score or whatever.
Yeah.
You're kind of duplicating it, and that
you got to do like a sound alike. Yeah.
Yeah, and it does the job, but it's not affecting people's emotions in a deep way. Every once in a while you get a chance to write something that really comes from the heart, and so maybe AI will be useful for those times where you just need to crank something out that isn't it's just sort of utilitarian music, and that'll be useful. But yeah, I mean that's where the rub is, I think, is.
Yeah. I kind of come from like my initial position on AI has always been pretty staunchly anti AI. I have a whole YouTube channel that's called The Art of Sucking at Music that's all about like not taking shortcuts and understanding that learning how to play music or learning any skill requires work, and it requires time and effort and those kinds of things. However, lately, especially like working with cinesamples and doing those kinds of like doing the video stuff and thumbnails and all of that stuff, it's like I've been using a lot more AI, and I've been seeing it integrated in certain ways that that support the creator. They don't replace the creator. And I am actually kind of like in favor of continuing to build tools that support creators, but I also have to realize that that's not exactly the world that we live in. Like it's available to everybody, and just as much as smaller creators like you or me might want to have AI tools that support our process, there's also like big corporations that want to have AI tools that support their bottom line. And so it could go in a lot of different directions, and it probably will go in many different directions at once. Some of them will be positive for music and the arts. Some of them will be negative for music and the arts. And we're just going to have to see which one of those wins out. But I'm wary of it, but I'm also understanding or beginning to understand the benefits of it too. But yeah, let's get into it. In the spirit of a discussion about AI, I thought it would be kind of a fun little twist to guide our conversation using questions that were written by AI. So I logged into ChatGPT and I wrote this prompt, and I've got the questions right here. I wrote, "Can you give me 10 questions to help spark and guide a thoughtful conversation about the nuances and implications of artificial intelligence in music?" And I actually got to say, like the questions that it gave me were pretty good. So I figured maybe what we can do to guide this podcast is just kind of go through these questions one by one. We'll take them one at a time, and then we'll just see how far we get, like how many of them we can get through. How do you guys feel about that?
Perfect merging of AI and humans. There we go.
Right?
Yeah.
Right. So how do you think artificial intelligence is reshaping the creative process in music and the arts? And what potential benefits or challenges does it bring to artists? We kind of already talked about this a little bit, but we can continue that discussion.
I would say in terms of visual arts, it's definitely changing a lot of things with Midjourney, and Photoshop obviously has all its built-in stuff that can extend the canvas, or you can have things added to it.
Mm-hmm.
Music seems to be the last thing to have been adapted to AI. My friend Greg Lehrman over at Output, they just released a really cool tool for their product Arcade, which is kind of what they call co-producer, which generates a sample pack for you, which I think is a really clever way of doing it. You type in a prompt, anything, and it will go through their catalog of sounds and generate a unique combination of things. And it gives you several options, and then you can kind of choose the starting point that you want to go with.
So it doesn't
That's kind of one-
create the samples for you. It sort of aggregates a unique sample pack from pre-existing samples for you.
That's what I understand. Yeah, I don't want to speak out
That's
of
cool.
turn.
Like
I don't
a
know technically what's
curation.
happening, but it's something that it's all there because they have so many sounds, right?
Right.
I applaud them for taking that approach. Like you got to wear two hats. You're the owner of a business and you're also a music creator. And so you got to like weigh both of those things. And so that seems to be the right way forward, I think.
Sure.
Because it's not replacing music creators. It's actually inspiring them,
Right.
It's helping you. And that, like, if you think about when you're working with a virtual instrument or a plugin or something, you do have a starting point. It could be some like really inspiring sound that's just like, oh, that's really cool. That's the start of my cue. Let me just put that down first.
Yeah.
And then
Well,
the
there's
rest kinda
that, and then there's like sequencers as well and stuff like that too, where you can kind of, or arpeggiators where you can kind of like play a chord and it'll maybe give you a little bit of an idea. Those
Right.
starting point tools have kind of been around for a really long time, for sure.
Yeah.
Drum loops and all that. Yeah. Because there's
Yeah.
so many ways to come up with a musical idea, and you can use so many different musical ideas as the foundation of an entire piece. So whether you're starting from a rhythmic perspective with a drum beat or a drum loop, or even a ostinato pattern on a melodic instrument, or if you're starting with a melody, or if that's played on a flute or a violin or a human voice, or if you're playing through chord progressions and find a chord progression that you like, and then starting from any of those places, you can build a whole composition based on that starting idea. And where I think there's a really cool opportunity with AI is in developing those ideas. There's a book by Aaron Copland, the composer, who he wrote a book for the layperson as a composer called "What to Listen For in Music," and it goes through chapter by chapter explaining how to hear rhythm and melody and harmony and tone color and different instrumentations and all of the different ways that composers view these things and use them as the basis for what they do to create and develop a theme. And he talks about how a composer starts with a musical idea, and sometimes that inspiration strikes without warning. There's no, sometimes we've all had this experience as music creators where we come up with some of our best ideas when we're in no way near our studio or in a
like the
place
most inopportune time.
Yeah, exactly. In the shower or driving home and stuck in traffic or something. And, thank goodness for voice memos and being able to record, hum an idea into that. But as a foundation, and now in the world of with electronic production and sample libraries and virtual instruments, we have so many cool sounds at our disposal that never existed in Aaron Copland's time. So you can get inspired by a sound effect or a musical idea or a an arpeggiated synth preset. Anything that you have at your fingertips can be the basis of a track. And so an idea that I've had that I think that could be really cool for an AI integration is, hey, here's my melody, here's my theme. Rearrange this or reorchestrate this as a 1940s jazz ballad or as a classical ballet style piece, or in the style of a modern film score for an action cue, and get a bunch of different options for how to further develop that theme, because sometimes we get stuck in an 8-bar loop and we love that 8-bar loop, and then when it's time to go to something else, we ruin the entire track and give up on the project and maybe come back to it later and Frankenstein it in with something else. But that's one of the ways that I think that there's a cool opportunity to
I mean, like in terms of how we're seeing it reshape the creative process currently, right? I gave the example of some of the tools that I've been using. So like, for instance, when I was working on the Iceland video, I had all of these different interviews that I had conducted with like Mike and Santi and Vegar. And it was, each interview was like an hour and a half long. So they're these big conversations where I had to go through and pick out sound bites and stuff like that and build a story. And normally the way that you would do that is you would print out the transcripts and then you would go through manually looking at actual paper with transcripts on it, and you would highlight the sound bites that you want, and then you would take those, put those on a piece of paper, and then arrange them sort of in a way, maybe in your computer or in a Word document, arrange them in a way that tells a story. And then you would have to make sure that you had the time codes for everything and you knew where everything was within the interview. And then you would go through and you would use the time codes to find those bits in the interviews and then put them together in a timeline. One of Premiere's new AI features is it'll automatically sort of like construct a transcript of each interview for you, which is really cool. It's not always perfect. Sometimes it gets words wrong, but for the most part, it's really good. But then they also have this new feature now that's like called text-based editing. So if you have the raw interview open and you have the transcript open and you're going through and you're reading through it looking for something, you can like say, I wanted to have a soundbite of someone saying something about the culture of Iceland. I could type in culture, and then it would highlight all of the times that, Mike said culture or cultural or something like that. And then I could find the soundbite that I wanted, and I could highlight from the word that I wanted him to start at to the word that I wanted him to end at, and then grab it from the transcript, so the text, and drag it into my timeline, and it would populate. Wow. Yeah, and it would populate the appropriate in and out points for the footage.
I was wondering how you make these videos so fast, Chris.
That's so the Iceland video is the only time that I've done that. It was the first time that I've used it. It's a brand new feature in Premiere, and it's really, really cool. So that's one way that I see it reshaping the creative process, where I'm like, that's super useful, right? Because it takes a process that's usually extremely tedious. It's not like it replaces the need to learn how to edit videos. It just makes a certain process of it that's usually very tedious a lot easier and faster. But you still have to be a good video editor to use it.
You still have to, right. And I think that brings up an interesting point about how, with people talking about how everything is going to change with AI, the misconception, in my opinion, that it replaces the need for technical skill or knowledge, that is a misconception. Mm-hmm. You still need to understand the concepts and the fundamentals of what makes a well-edited video, what makes a good piece of music, what makes a good script with a good story structure that makes these things applicable and pleasing to the human consumer, who's at the end of the day the person who's going to ostensibly be paying for this thing that makes it worth putting effort into creating. That's something that you can use AI to learn about. And that's something, I'm probably getting ahead of ourselves in the next 9 questions that we've got coming up, but one of the best applications is for learning how to understand these things better. It's not going to be able to teach you how to play piano because it can't move your hands for you and develop the dexterity and the rhythmic control and the physical motor skills required to do that. But it can explain the history of how a piano that we know as we know it came to be built and the construction of it. And one of my favorite ways to use ChatGPT and AI technology for learning is you can ask it a specific question and get a direct answer. And, it used to be you had to Google something. If you had a specific question, you Google something and then it gives you a bunch of articles, and then you have to comb through the articles, and most of the information in those articles goes over your head, because the reason I asked the question in the first place is because I don't know anything about this. And so I'm just kind of reading through the article and my eyes are glazing over, and I finally see, oh, okay, cool. There was the answer to the thing. But now I have like 10 other questions that came up, and I don't have the wherewithal to go back through and Google all 10 of them. But I asked ChatGPT a question, it gives me an answer, and I can go and say, okay, cool. I don't understand this, and this that you said. Explain more about it. And so that's been a useful feature. So using that for things like what makes a well-edited video. You know, I asked it to describe, you know, what describe a perfectly tailored suit. You know, all these things that you can have it do to explain these things, because it's trained on material that humans have put into it about how to describe these things well and simplify them and make them understandable.
Well, and these are sort of all examples of ways that we've seen AI more or less positively impact or reshape the creative process. But there are also ways, I think, you know, that it can and in some ways maybe has negatively impacted the creative process, right? So like graphic design would probably be the most immediate example for me right now, because, you know, especially since I've been spending a lot of time in Midjourney lately, because thumbnails are something that take a lot of time to do. And sometimes it can be helpful to go into Midjourney and just type in a few prompts and see what it spits out to see if you find anything cool. And generally, like the way that I use it is in sort of a more baseline way. So like the cover image of this podcast, you know, what I did was I went into Midjourney, and instead of going through like Adobe stock to find an image of a woman from a side profile that I could use and then, you know, put into Photoshop and do that kind of thing, I just typed it in and it gave me one that I didn't have to pay for from Adobe stock or something like that. And then I took it and I put it into Photoshop and then I did my thing from there. But a lot of people can use and will use and are using things like Midjourney and image generation to replace graphic design, right? Or having to learn graphic design chops, having to learn photography. I don't feel like that has necessarily bled over into music quite yet, but it sort of inevitably will. Partially, you know, in the ways, Mike, that we explored with that web app, right? Like, how do you see it reshaping the world of music? Like, are there other examples that you guys have seen of how it's reshaping music or the creative arts in a negative way?
No, I mean, I think that there's some things out there that are just simply music generators. Like, you know, Google has one. Has another one called Suno, which just came out. I mean, I personally, I don't understand how that will work, because who's going to listen? I mean, gosh, I sound like an old person here, but like, who's going to listen to like, hey, I just need something that's just a certain style of music and just play.
But Mike, we're kind of already there. I mean, like if you listen to pop music and stuff like that,
are people listening to this stuff? I mean, like my kids don't, or maybe they're just because they're my kids and they have good music taste. I make sure of that. But like, yeah, I saw some of these ads for this stuff where you just type in a prompt and you get like, I just want like, I'm walking down the street and I need like a hip hop groove or something. I'm like, yeah, but wouldn't you rather listen to something that's been produced and like thought through?
Well, one of the things that comes to mind with me, and this has been sort of one of my gripes with it for a while, is looking at the industry, the music industry. And this probably goes more for contemporary music, but it could also go for composing and things like that. But one of my main gripes has been, if you look at sort of the landscape of contemporary music today and what's popular, so much of it is mechanical, right?
Yeah.
It's all formula. Yeah. It's all of these things. And that's what sells, because I think that when you look at the broader culture of music consumption over the last couple of decades or few decades, music has kind of become more of a secondary thing. You know, it used to be like a primary activity. You would put on a record, you know, you'd put on side A of a record, you'd drop the needle, and you would sit and you would listen to the music. It was a primary engaging activity. Now music has become something that it's like, I just need a good beat in the background while I, you know, put on my makeup and brush my teeth and get ready to go to the club or things like that. And so when I look at that aspect of popular music today, especially, I could see a world in which, you know, record labels cut out the artists entirely. And they've already tried to do this, right? Like there are some AI artists that have been signed to record labels.
Yeah.
I don't know where all that landed. The ones who have the power to sort of dictate where it goes are the ones who stand to gain the most money from it. Right. The corporations and the record labels and stuff like that. So Mike, and in terms of what you were talking about there, it's like, I think you and I can say, yeah, when we listen to music, we really listen to the artists and we think about where they were coming from, and we hear the arrangement and the orchestration and all of those things. A lot of people don't. And that's not what's selling super, super hard these days either, right?
Yeah, no, I think there's room for all of it. I don't want to disparage it. I just personally wouldn't listen to it. I don't know. There's room for all of these kinds of things. But I think, like, I don't know, there's this thing called music that withstands the test of time. And will AI-generated music, like, become iconic and that, like, 30, 40 years from now become classic hits, And that's a question. Will we listen to it the way we listen to, like, Led Zeppelin or some of the Beatles or something?
Well, I have a question for you, Mike. Since the 90s, late 90s, early 2000s, and this isn't an AI-based question, but since the late 90s, early 2000s, are there any artists that you can identify that have created music that you think will last the test of time and that we'll look back on in 50 years in the same way that we look back on Led Zeppelin or The Who or the Beatles, things like that?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a small list.
Are you saying since the 90s and 2000s, like excluding the 90s and 2000s? Because I've been on a 90s and 2000s kick lately, and there's
excluding.
A lot of,
I think my personal opinion is that the 90s and 2000s were sort of the last era of the legendary bands or music creations.
No, you're right. You're right.
Yeah.
I mean,
I agree with that assessment, Chris, because I think it comes back to something you were saying earlier about how listening to music was kind of a primary activity when you would put on the record and listen to it. And then the evolution of that was then, I guess it came first, but the radio, 90s, 2000s, the radio was one of the primary ways that people listened to music. And the advent of streaming with Spotify and Apple Music has really changed the way that music is created now, and then TikTok has further gone down that hole, because in the 90s and 2000s, the ideal song length to be played on the radio was about 3.5 minutes. So most of the music that was being produced and written by bands, similar sounds, similar instrumentations, similar types of beats and chord progressions and guitar tones and vocal effects and things that they were using. And part of the reason for that was the radio stations liked that, because that was what kept people listening, so that then they could get the commercials in front of them, and that was the driver there. Then with streaming and the monetization of being paid per play, but being paid an extremely small amount of money per play, that was the beginning of shrinking of people's attention spans. You don't see many prog rock bands putting out 8.5-minute tracks on Spotify anymore, because it's really hard to get someone to sit and listen to that and get paid 0.000000002 cents for one stream all the way through. So now we've seen things get down to 2 to 2.5 minutes, and you see bands releasing the same track as a single, and then they'll release 2 more tracks and then put them together on a single, and it'll be a different album so that you can stream all 3 of them differently. And then they'll put out an album of songs, and all 3 of those tracks from the 2 singles will be on that album. So they're getting basically triple income streams out of the same songs, and I can't begrudge them for that. I listen to a lot of bands that do that, and it works, and it's what they kind of have to do to make it work for them. And now we're in a social media environment where people are scrolling through at a rate of about 10 seconds per video or less of things that they're watching. And so songs are literally sped up and shortened and made to be as easy to digest as possible, and just kind of attention grabbing. So I think that part of what the AI change there is, they can generate 10 seconds of something just to quickly throw under your TikTok video, your Instagram reel.
Which I think is that, to me, that's fine. Like, if you just need 10 seconds of music to throw under your TikTok reel, go for it. But if a record label wants to create 3 minutes of the next hit single,
right?
Or if a production company wants to create, a 2.5 minute cue that fits their scene perfectly, then that's where it starts to get a little tricky, right?
Yeah. I don't see them putting out now. That's what I call music 237, and it's just 140 15-second tracks.
Oh my God, I remember those CDs.
Right.
The next question, and it's this question is sort of like the one we just answered. It's in what ways have you observed AI being used in the creation of music or artistic expressions, and how does it compare to traditional methods? And I feel like we kind of talked about that already. So I'm gonna rephrase this or restructure this a little bit for people who are just getting into music with these AI tools available. How is that going to sort of impact their musical journey? And how do you think that contrasts with sort of the more traditional way to learn music?
Yeah. Well, I think overall we're seeing this trend from, going back to the 90s, where most people were just consumers of music and creators of music were sort of a very small subset. You needed a proper studio and all of this stuff and a budget to create music, and it's been democratized with technology, where there's some incredible music just being written today in home studios. The downside, obviously, is there's no big machine behind it all to get it out there. But I think we're going to see even more of that, sort of where music creation becomes more accessible to more people. And I think AI is just part of that. I mean, it's I think people are still going to want to compose and write music, the old-fashioned way. And by old-fashioned, I mean with a sequencer and with a DAW and with and MIDI and sample libraries, because there's something really enjoyable about just composing. I mean, creating is an act, and it's something that we just really love as humans. And I think AI is just there to be the assistant to help us. And you don't get that experience if you're just typing a prompt in and then you're getting something. I don't feel that when I'm working with Midjourney. It's more like a tool. It's like this fun magic trick that's cool, but I don't feel like I've expressed that creative gene, Sure. And that's something that's going to be true in 10 years, 50 years, 100 years from now. Humans are creative by their nature, and there's something about that process, sort of even the painstaking process of making minute decisions about, in this case, what your velocity should be on the C# or whatever. Like that kind of stuff is always going to be something that people want to do. So I guess to answer the question, just more people are going to be making music. There's going to be just more of that.
Do you think it's that like more people will be making music, but less people will be learning how to make music? So like if let's say prompt based music generation or MIDI generation becomes a thing, and that becomes, a way that people start to interact with music. Do you see that as a road to more people playing music who don't actually know how to play music, or do you see that as an inroad for people to get curious?
You said it. I see it more as an inroad, a gateway drug, if you will, to music creation. Like, for example, there's a great company. They're doing something called it's called WAV Tool, and they have a DAW that's an AI DAW, and you can know nothing about how to work with a sequencer, but you just type a prompt in, and it could do everything for you. But I still think that you'll still want to dive in. You'll be like just out of curiosity to dive in and edit things, or maybe change the EQ or all this to make it your own. Yeah. So I would say, to answer the question, gateway drug. That's what I see AI as. Yeah. Like humans aren't. There's this desire. I mean, I'm getting philosophical here, but I think that there's a driving force inside of us that wants to be creative, and that AI alone won't satisfy. Sure, there'll be people that get up just type a prompt and get the music back. And like, yeah, it's cool. And then they go on with their lives. Not every human on earth wants to make music. That's a false thing. I think that there's like a lot of these tech companies are saying, we're going to make everyone on earth make music. And that's silly.
I know
some
one.
people just don't want to do it. Like it's not, they just want to listen, or maybe music's not something that, believe it or not, there are people that walk the earth that don't like music. Can you believe that?
It's a very strange
percentage, but
I was just going to say, I agree completely that it's a gateway, because I think with prompt engineering, you need to know to an extent what you're doing. And even if you are just completely flying blind saying, give me some music that sounds like this song, it may do it, but everyone hears music differently. Everyone has different things that they latch onto in music. Even people who are highly trained and highly knowledgeable and can identify people with perfect pitch, who can hear exactly what notes are being played, and are accomplished orchestrators and arrangers and know exactly what instruments are being used, and producers who know exactly what, compression settings are being applied, and all of that. There are so many nuances and so many aspects to music that people can latch onto and that they hear differently. And it's informed by so many things. It's informed by what instruments we first learned to play. Like, for example, I'm a saxophone player. That's my primary instrument growing up. So playing monophonic woodwind instruments, I can identify chords. I know all my music theory. I can hear, play a chord. I'll tell you what it is, but I can't transcribe things harmonically on the piano. My keyboard skills aren't quite there. I don't have the two-handed ability that someone like Mike or one of the other pianists on our team can do, or that you as a guitar player, Chris, can I'm sure identify and go through chord progressions. So I relate more to the melody and the rhythm aspects of music, because those are what I first learned to identify through my own musical training. I know that other people, drummers can have a more perfect sense of time. Violinists and string players have an unbelievable sense of pitch and vibrato and timing and melodic shape and structure. Same with vocalists. Keyboard players have a great sense of harmonic rhythm and voicings and being able to hear multiple musical parts going on at the same time. The layperson who's just kind of messing around with a text prompt, they may not have any idea when they get the result back from the prompt that they enter. They may not know how to get it closer to what they actually want, because the AI engine thought, oh, you want a song that sounds like this, you must want something that sounds like this vocal melody. But what the person really had in mind was, no, I want something like this drum beat. But they might not even know how to express that or dial that in. They may be able to use that as a learning avenue to figure that out and to dig more deeply into that and to identify and to start to recognize, oh, that's what people mean when they talk about chord progressions. That's what people mean when they talk about vocal harmonies or things like that. When they start to recognize all of these different things. A lot of people many people have trouble identifying different instruments. They don't know the difference between an oboe and an acoustic guitar if they hear it. They if you point it out, they'll know their different sounds, of course, but not everyone can just hear an instrument and
exactly.
Identify it.
And I think that's exciting to know that someone will start on that journey.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
Of course, I didn't know what the difference between an oboe and a guitar was when I was 10 years old.
No, exactly.
I learned, and I just think that people are going to want to learn. People want to dive deeper and grow and improve, and instruments will always be around for forever. Pianos, a wooden piano will always be around. A cello and people will want to learn to play a cello, even though you can just. In the future, who knows, 100 years from now, why would you need to know how to play the cello? Because it's just, there's something awesome about performing and learning how to do something. I just started getting into cubing. Why learn how to solve a Rubik's Cube? That's seems like the way, but it's super fun.
It's an algorithm, Mike. Right. It's an algorithm.
It's an algorithm. It's like it's a weird art form, you know, these super nerds who can do this stuff in 5 seconds. But a computer can solve a Rubik's Cube faster than any human. Why should humans learn how to do that? You know?
Well, I think it's just like everything else, including music, tech, and AI and all this stuff. It's pretty nuanced, right? Because if you go back to like hip hop and the introduction of sampling, using sampling other people's music in your music, right? What would that be like? The beginning of the 80s, kind of. A lot of people were saying that's not playing music. That's not music making. Right? When sequencers and synthesizers came out, that's not music. That's not music making. That's programming.
Yeah.
And today we have people that started out or got into music by literally using a mouse and a keyboard, not a music keyboard, but a computer keyboard, and penciled in MIDI notes into the piano roll. And some of those people may have gone and learned a piano and may have gone and learned an instrument. And then some of those people might still just be, or are still just, penciling in MIDI notes into a piano roll. So I think it's
how I
like
do most of mine. And I do know how to do it, but
like anything else, it's going to be, a spectrum, right? And there's going to be a whole new sector of like professional musicians that come out that are text-based prompt musicians, right? If that's the form of AI in music that emerges, just like there are DJs who perform large concerts for thousands and thousands of people who didn't play a single musical note in their lives, right?
Right.
That's a big assumption. DJs, you're fine. I'm not judging you. It's okay. But it's all different.
It's become an art form. It used to be disparaged, but now it's like
my alma mater, Berklee College of Music, they now recognize laptop as a principal instrument. You can go and learn how to use Ableton Live and other software as your primary means of relating to and creating music. So
yeah, isn't that wild? And then so think about that, 10 years from now, where Berklee College of Music has a class that's text-based prompt music writing.
Yeah.
Like
they might already have that class.
It's more of a writing class. Yeah, it's more of like a literature class than it is a music class. That's pretty wild. Guys, like we're 2 questions in, right? And we're already 53 minutes into this. So maybe we'll do one more question from Chat GPT, and then I have a question of my own as well. Do you think that AI could truly understand and evoke emotions in art? And how does the emotional aspect of artistic creation change when AI is involved?
Talk about philosophical.
That's what podcasts are for, man.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a tough one because it can create a chord progression for you, which can evoke a certain emotion. There's your emotion. But like, oh gosh, I don't know. Like when you think of what film composers do or game composers, their job is basically using music as a way to manipulate emotions. And this is just sort of like there's this bag of tricks you can go, there's like 86 different things you can do using chord progressions, using instrumentation, using melody to achieve certain or to evoke certain emotions. And I think that AI could certainly learn that bag of tricks. But yeah, I don't know. This is like, who the heck knows? Is there a limit to that?
Right.
Could it create something that like John Williams could create? I don't know. I don't think so.
Well, that's
maybe.
Yeah, because I mean that bag of tricks. That's the training that composers undergo. We describe those things to each other. We express this is what This is how you evoke a feeling of dramatic suspense, or romance, or joy, or this is a sound that makes you feel at peace or fired up for action. I think that AI can understand how to take that in and then regurgitate it basically, and because, as you said earlier, Mike, it's an imitator. It understands the X means X, Y means Y. These are the things that it can take in with that information that it's given and retain that and find, and put it back out with similar patterns. I don't think what we describe as human emotion and feeling, it's a physical experience. It's a psychological experience. It's something that has so much to do with physiological factors that computers just don't have, and that AI language models don't. They don't have the hormones and brain chemistry and psychological experiences that we do, but it can imitate it. And yeah, going back to the musical idea that someone like John Williams can come up with, that's something that comes from an unknown place. It doesn't really, there's no way to kind of predict it. There's no way to make it happen when you need it to happen. And that's why the concept of talent and all of that is so prevalent. And
I think we're touching on the difference between originality and imitation. And I remember one of the when I was first starting out as a composer, and I got my first project, and I basically scored it, and it sounded like Alan Silvestri, Back to the Future, and I was using all the kind of tricks that Alan Silvestri uses in that movie, mostly octatonic scales and all these things. And we actually recorded it with a live orchestra. I was super proud of it, and I sent it to a composer, Joel McNeely, who was somebody I was kind of working with early in the early 2000s, and he gave me really very direct advice, and he says, "Don't be an imitator." He didn't, because he thought it was very well written and everything, but he's like, "This is just an imitation. Do something original." And that's probably why I never won an Academy Award. I'm not like a famous composer, because I got really good at imitating. That's what I did.
Right.
But the guys that have really succeeded, I found, had a voice that was original. And so that's the question: can AI be purely original without just being an imitator?
Well, and I think too, it like the subject of the human quality of music and art and stuff like that comes down to even a more granular level than arrangement or chord structure or things like that, or originality, right? Coming down to the idea of how somebody plays an instrument. So to use an example here, you can take a solo cello from one of Musio's, from Cinestrings, one of the Cinestrings libraries, or you can take a solo cello from Tina Guo's cello, right? And they're going to sound very different because of the way that Tina Guo plays her cello. That's what makes her library unique, and her style unique, the way that she plays. And I remember watching this this YouTube video. Do you guys know who Rick Beato is on YouTube? He's one of the biggest music YouTubers. But he did this video where he was analyzing John Bonham's drum tracks for When the Levee Breaks.
Oh yeah.
And what makes it so unique. And then he takes it and he quantizes it. And as soon as it's quantized, it no longer sounds like John Bonham, right? Because the thing that makes a group of people playing together human is the imperfection, the imperfection that you can't fabricate. It's the things that happen in a moment when you're playing together that you can't replicate, you can't plan for it. Things like when you're a bunch of people playing together, you have all of these different elements going on, and everyone's going to make mistakes. Things are going to go wrong, or something's going to change. Someone's going to slow down, or someone's going to speed up, and you're all listening to each other, and you have to kind of it's this dance that happens between people. And even as good as the technology gets, I don't think that it could ever get to the point where it's emulating that breadth of movement that happens between people playing music, right? There's even when it comes down to how good sample libraries have gotten, how good digital recording has gotten, and you can make something that sounds like professionally recorded in your bedroom. I scored an Emmy Award-winning ESPN documentary in my bedroom at my dad's house. That's how, that's how good tech has gotten. But even with all of those advancements in technology that we've seen over the last 20 years, you still kind of can't supplement putting 5 people in a band in a room and having them play live together. Even the process of tracking separately, right?
Yeah.
Changes the way that something sounds, and it's different than if you have people in playing live together. So I don't think that we'll ever get to that point. I don't think that I think that those are the parts of music, that lightning in a bottle thing that happens, whether it's Soundgarden or Nirvana. And I'm on this 90s kick now because we were talking about it, but like it's capturing lightning in a bottle. And that's the piece, that human element of it, that's the piece that moves people emotionally when they listen to music. And so, at least from my perspective. And so, like, I don't think that technology and computers will ever get there. I don't think that we'll ever be able to fully emulate the organic nature of musicians playing instruments.
I hope you're right, Chris. I mean,
I think that's,
I think that's everyone's hope. I hope. Yeah.
It's what you were saying earlier, Mike, about the fun, the in the moment, the creativity, the part that we enjoy as humans. We don't want, I don't think anybody wants computers to take that part away from us. But as you were just talking, Chris, I did have it would be fun to see people put 5 laptops in a room together and create some system where they're generating and listening to each other and an AI jam band going on. I think that's I'd watch that
right.
once for the novelty.
I think actually, you know what, Mike? I think that's a good idea. Maybe we should use that web app and try and figure out a way to like daisy chain 5 of our computers together, and we can like do an AI jam
real time.
And it's just feedback. It's just an AI feedback loop.
Yeah. Well, we're coming up on the hour here. And we've gotten through 3 questions. So I think that means that ChatGPT did a very good job of writing questions to prompt a thoughtful conversation about AI, because it was so thoughtful that we could only answer 3 of those questions. But I do have one question of my own, and it's maybe like less of a question and more of a discussion. As we said sort of at the top of this episode, we're a music tech company. We're focused on providing tools that help music creators create music. Mm-hmm. And being that AI is such a big direction that things are going, we have to consider it at the very least. We don't know if we're going to implement it, and if we do, how we would implement it. But it's something that we have to talk about, and that's sort of what this whole discussion is about. So I just wanted to talk about, ways that we think we might, if we do implement AI, what are the considerations that we have when having that discussion in terms of our own product, in terms of Musio? What could those things look like? And what do we want to make sure that we do right with it?
I think that it's more of a figuring out what do people want and keeping that open dialogue. The thing is, we're building something for people. We're not going to just build something totally in a vacuum and just be like, this is what you're going to use. Good luck. And that's one of the best things about Musio is that there's all this feedback. There's a feedback button in the app that you can just you talk to the team and we respond and apply the feedback pretty quickly. But yeah, no, I think that there should be something. I just don't know what. There's also limitations. I mean, Musio is a plugin that runs in a DAW.
Right.
So there's limitations right there with what you can do. For me, when I was just trying to figure this out, I think that having some kind of a MIDI generator could be useful. One that could, basically take the information that's already being played and then offer you something that you can add. It's like, hey, can you add a staccato string line to this, or could you add a drum loop, or give me a 8-bar drum loop for this using, and then it can pull up one of the many drum kits that we have and just drag it in, have it actually listen to the MIDI, because it could do that.
Right.
It's performing the MIDI, so there's no reason why it can't listen. Just like have it listen to a section and then say, hey, could you make the strings a little bit more emotive,
Right.
And it could draw hairpins in there, or it can just fix the MIDI and clean it up so it's a little bit better. Or, hey, could you revoice these low strings so that they sound a little bigger and better, Stuff like that,
Yeah.
that just takes time, that no one wants to sit and mess with. I think that there's something there. If it saves composers time so that they could focus on being creative, I think that we're being helpful. But if it's something that's just generating something out of nowhere and the composer is a secondary thought, that's probably not the right direction.
And how do you guard against that? So like, what are, if you create a text-based prompt MIDI generating AI program and we include it in Musio, what are some things that you can put into place, that encourage it to be more of a tool, like you're saying, whether it's for an idea or a starting point, or to sort of like help move things along, like with Premiere and the text-based editing? What are some things that you put in place or can put in place that can guard against it becoming just like something where people are just generating stuff for commercial use and just relying on it as a creative, as the thing creating it and replacing the composer?
I think that's the touch point. That's the point that makes people concerned. That's why we hit the pause button on it.
Yeah.
It just seemed like, oh, this is not so. Yeah, I don't know, because if you have a MIDI generator, people are going to want to just be like, give me a piece of music that does a thing, and then drag it in and play with it and add something to it. And I don't know. I wouldn't want to limit it. I would just say, hey, if you want that, here it is. It does that functionality. If you don't use it.
I wonder if there's a way to like, because like Musio, it's a tool for musicians. That's what we're giving people, right? And and we're trying to support people in their creative process. And one of the things that can be very supportive in the creative process is finding ideas, because like the days of creating something original, truly original, are over. You can't write anything without plagiarizing somebody, because it all comes from somewhere. We're all ripping each other off to some degree. Right. And when you're composing something, let's say you hit a roadblock or some, a writer's block, which is inevitable. You're always going to do that. What do? You go for a walk. Maybe you listen to something to try and get an idea from somewhere to start. And having AI as a tool to sort of supplement for that, instead of getting your idea from a John Williams piece, you're typing something into AI and it's generating something that's an idea for you, and then you can take it from there. The risk is people start composing with purely, or the majority of things being text-based prompts, right? So maybe, like, what if there was a way to watermark anything that was generated with AI, and to say, somewhere in there, like, this cannot be used for commercial use. It's purely here to be an idea generator or something to help you start an idea or shape something a little bit better or something like that.
I think those legal guardrails already exist in a lot of ways. And in my view, I think the limitations are kind of automatically created by the fact that people need to know what they're doing with a text prompt in the first place. They could just say, write me a cue that sounds exactly like this piece by Hans Zimmer or whatever. But by its very nature, they know that they would know in that situation that they are directly ripping someone off. And I'm not a legal scholar. I don't know the details of all of it, but my understanding is AI generated work can't be copyrighted, and that's the legal basis for being able to properly monetize something in the first place. And I think that as far as guardrails that we
true.
can, it may not be. Don't again. I'm not.
I think it might not be. I mean, Like the whole writer's strike and the whole actor strikes that just ended in LA, those were all about AI generated scripts.
Absolutely.
And then like for actors, they just wanted to bring in background actors and scan their faces to be able to use them in perpetuity.
Right.
So I think that there are very few legal guardrails against AI right now because it's so new and we're sort of trying to figure out our way with it.
Yeah. Well, the copyright law and all, it's going to drag way behind any advancements that happen.
Oh yeah. Yeah, we still haven't figured out how to regulate Facebook. How long has that been out, right?
I know.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. I mean, as far as guardrails that we could put on it, I agree with what you said, Mike, you know, that we don't, there's not really any, and there's not really any that we need to, you know, we're kind of expecting people to act in good faith anyway, because people could already use a lot of our products to make a cover of something that is technically a violation of a copyrighted piece of music and all of that, you know?
Yeah. I don't think you'd put any guardrails on it, because like you would just say, hey, if you create something with this using the AI generator, you own it and you can monetize it to your benefit, you know? And I think that's more for like pro composer.
Well, then how do you speak to, you know, the concerns of other composers? Like say, you know, because the composer market, as we all know, is pretty, it's pretty competitive. There are a lot of people trying to be composers, and you do have to currently know how to compose something in order to compete in that market and find work. Mm-hmm. So what if you know, now you're opening the door. This is just me playing devil's advocate here, just to spice up the conversation in this area. Currently, it's probably that, you know, no text-based generation of music will be very competitive in the space of film composing. But as the technology develops, you know, you never know how good it might get at these things. And copyright aside, Steve, like maybe you're not saying, you know, compose me something that sounds exactly like Hans Zimmer, but you are composing something using entirely text-based prompts. How, you know, how do we speak to the creative people who are, you know, using Musio or who want to use Musio to compose music themselves? How do we speak to their fears of, you know, the market becoming more competitive because it's more saturated with people?
Yeah, I think that's what we're seeing actually is from companies, game companies. I've seen contracts now where they're putting in clauses, AI clauses, saying you can't use any AI generated music, because as a company, we've hired you, the human, to make it. And I'm paying a particular premium to have you. So I don't want you cheating and using AI. Like I want you. So I think that's probably, if that expands, that could be really good. I could use AI and just do it myself. But if I want a human, I'm going to put that clause in there. So maybe that's part of the, I mean, but like this idea, like I see this a lot on X, where people are like, we need to start a movement and we need to change things and like cause some kind of big thing to happen. I don't think that's possible. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
for me, it comes back to what I said at the top of the discussion of the options for that have already existed. You know, the options for not using a composer and getting the music from something that is now equivalent, you know, AI is an equivalent. Those have already existed. And if you want to get work as a composer, it's about the relationships that you develop with filmmakers and content creators who need human generated music and want to work with you and want to have your unique imprint and your voice and your contribution as a person to the project and to the collaborative effort. And I think that's something that's not really going away. I think that even with how starved the streaming services are for content and how they're just greenlighting everything and you know, and trying to get as many movies and shows and things out there as possible, there are still tons of independent game developers, independent filmmakers, independent web series creators who are looking to create art for the sake of creating art and to make movies and games and animated content and things that that are important to them. And part of what makes it important to them is the fact that other humans were involved in it, and people came together to create something that's greater than the sum of its parts. And I think that that's something that, it's the same kind of concerns that people had when sample libraries came onto the scene, and people said, "Oh, this is going to put orchestra musicians out of work. No one's going to want to record live musicians anymore." And that hasn't really been the case. I mean, sure, maybe there's been
the opposite has happened.
Yeah, exactly. Because
there's more orchestra recording now than any time in history. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, people make the mock-up and they show it to the director and they say, we need to get this recorded.
Yeah, I think that there's something to be said about that for sure. But I also think that I think it would be wise to be a little bit cautious about comparing the types of technology that we're playing with now to the types of technology that we were playing with in the past and things that have come out. I think that there are a lot of things that we can learn from that. But like a prime example is, in the conversation of social media, a lot of people compare social media and the worry that people have about it to television when television first came out, right? But there's a big difference. Like, people were really worried about TV and how it would impact society. And the truth is that a lot of the ways that they worried it would, did happen. But like, there's a really big difference between social media and television, because television, was something that you still had to go to, right? Mm-hmm. Social media is an entirely different technology with an entirely different, powerful attention holding algorithm behind it, and it has the ability to get you to pick it up when it wants you to, right? And that's totally different. When social media first started coming out, like, everyone was like, this is great, it's going to connect everybody, it's going to help everybody get connected around the world and bring everyone closer. And then there were all of these implications that we could not foresee because it was a technology that we did not understand fully, right? I think the same can be said about AI. Like, I don't worry about AI becoming sentient or anything like that. But we've already seen, again, in the world of social media, we've already seen how AI and deep learning algorithms and things like that have negatively affected society as a whole, right?
Yeah.
In a lot of different ways, in ways that we never would have thought. I'm not saying that that's the exact same thing as the way that it would interact with the arts, but I think we have to take into account the fact that there are ways that this is gonna play out in the arts, inevitably, that there's no way for us to know that now. And that there are going to be, because we're all human, there are going to be negative impacts and negative ways in which it's used in music and the arts. The reason why it's important for us to have this conversation is because we are actually in a position, Mike, back to what you were saying about people on Twitter, saying we need to do something. Maybe they don't. But we certainly do. We need to decide, like, how are we going to implement it to sort of be the ones to maybe show the ways that it can be used positively to support creative people and not replace creative people, right?
Yeah. I think the social media analogy is a really good one, because it's about the egalitarian nature of it. It's accessible to everybody, and it was. I remember when social media first came out. I remember before smartphones, when there was one computer in the house, and the internet was a place that you went, and you were there when you were there, and then you left, and it didn't follow you around in your pocket. And you're exactly right that with the widespread availability of AI technology and all the different ways that anyone can think to use it and to interact with it, there's a lot of implications that we can't foresee and can't predict, and a lot of things that people will use. But I want to go back to touching on the how we could use it and how we can implement it. Something that I was thinking about when you were describing it as an assistive tool, Mike. One of the things that's come to mind, and this is probably a discussion to have in a meeting and everything, but one of the ways that it could be cool is, hey, here's this melody that I've written. What are I'm just using the sustain patch and here are the notes that I have. What are the best articulations to use instead of just, having it be sustained notes? Which of these notes should be spiccato or staccato or marcato instead, or what are the what are the best ways to get the most realistic performance based on the samples that we have available? Because we recorded all those articulations, and the process of going through and changing the each note in your sequence to be the right articulation, and then shifting it a little bit to fit the timing. It's tedious and it's time consuming, and it's important to do if you want a really high quality result, but it's also the kind of thing that could be effectively replaced, or not replaced, but augmented and finessed by AI technology. So, but again, it's something that you have to know, right? Yeah. It's kind of would be kind of a neat thing.
It's both assistive and educational, right?
Right.
Because maybe it would teach you something that you never would have thought of before.
Yeah. Because a lot of people, what does colegno even mean? When would I even use how do you even pronounce sforzando? All these Italian words all over our software.
No, that's good. I think it's about, it's like building the technology, but meeting people where they're at already.
Yeah.
In their workflows. Like when self-driving cars came out, they didn't remove the steering wheel. There aren't these just pods that just drive around. It's an actual car still, that has this added feature to it. I still think we need the steering wheel, like the DAW and plugins and things like that. That's not going away anytime soon.
Well, they're also getting more powerful too. Yeah.
Yeah. So meeting people where they're at and integrating it into the workflows that we're all familiar with already.
Yeah.
Until the next generation, the kids that are 12 years old right now are going to learn whatever's new.
Yeah. Then when the Neuralink actually gets really good, and then it can just transcribe the musical idea right out of your brain and orchestrate it for you there.
I think it's an exciting time. It's overall very positive. I mean, there's a lot of negatives, but I think that I don't know. It's what's difficult, I think, is just based off the last hour and a half, we don't know what the future is, right? It's just kind of, we're speculating, and no one on earth knows what the heck's going to happen. But we're in this place where we're just going to we're very alert and aware of where things are going. And we just, everyone has to be ready to adapt. If you're a music creator listening to this, it's just be on guard and get ready. Because I think you could benefit from whatever big change is going to be coming.
Absolutely. Well, guys, this has been a really kind of interesting conversation. I think it's interesting that we all have our sort of different perspectives on it. And as a music tech company, I think it's great to have these discussions and bring all of those ideas together. So thanks for sitting down and having this conversation. Is there anything that you guys want to say, any parting words or anything like that before we sign off?
Anyone that's still listening, we'd like to hear what your opinions are about this and what you would like to see from a company like us, because this is something we want to do this right. And so put it in the comments. Well, if it's Apple, I don't know, wherever you're listening, comment or just ping us on Twitter or something. Because I think that's really going to be very important here, so that we can see where people are at. We want to navigate this carefully and not do anything too rash.
We read every single feedback submission, and we make a lot of the decisions that we do about what are our priorities for implementing new things into Musio. A lot of the feedback tickets that we get from users carry a lot of weight in those discussions. So if you have ideas, if you have things you'd like to see, if you have concerns, things that we shouldn't do, share them with us. Let them know. Hit that submit feedback button in Musio, and my team and I will take it all in.
All right. So yeah, guys, if you have any ideas about this, if you're watching on YouTube, comment below. Like Steve said, send us a feedback ticket, reach out to us somehow, because we really, really would love to hear your thoughts on it. We know it's a super, super nuanced conversation. There's no black or white. It's all gray. And so we want to make sure, like Mike said, that we're navigating this in a thoughtful way. So thank you guys so much for sticking with us through this conversation. And listening to us blab on and on. But thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you on the next episode. Talk to you later.